All right, hey everyone. So this is your lecture for the next lesson, lesson 4.5. And what we're going to be talking about today are observational studies and experiments. We're going to get to the quick notes there with kind of your learning targets and what you need to have known for this. But first, let's talk about this whole scenario here. So our whole scenario we're working with today. Does SAT prep improve scores? Specifically, your SAT score. So we have our scenario here with a certain high school offered an after-school SAT prep class that students could volunteer to take. 44 students took the course and then took the SAT. The average SAT score for this group was 1,220. So again, that's for those that took this course. For the ones that didn't, the average SAT score for all students who did not take the prep class was 1,050. So when you're looking at this, we're going to answer some questions today. First, is this observational or experimental? It's the first question you want to ask yourself. And this is good to do, even though it's in a video format, it's still probably best to do with your group and talk through it and then come back to this. However, I know it's Friday, so now I'm dating the video, but it's a Friday, it's Halloween. Probably not our favorite thing to do, talk to each other. We probably just want to get done. So let's talk through this. What would this be? What is this situation? This situation is an observational study. But why? So we could look at using the stats words, but if we're just talking about the context here, the big thing, students aren't being forced. They're not being forced to take the class. Now, we can then come in with our fancy stats things here and talk about the fact that for an observational study, we have no treatment. There's nothing that we are doing here for this observational study. Compared to when we talk about an experiment, we're going to have some sort of treatment imposed. Now, that's like your very AP stats way. I always think of it like, am I doing something or am I watching something? If I'm actually doing something, changing something, that's where we're looking at experiment. But I'm not doing any of that. I'm just watching. All right, next, identify the explanatory. So I'm just going to put EX. Hopefully you would put all of them. Actually, I'll just write it all. It's Friday, but whatever. And our response. Now take a minute, think here. What's our explanatory? A lot of people want to say it's the SAT prep course. But some people cannot take that. So we're not actually looking at that being our explanatory. Instead, it's whether or not they took the course. Now we're looking at our response. I think that one's a little bit easier. I don't see a lot of major issues with figuring out that one. That one's pretty straightforward. Our response is just their SAT score. Now, side note, and we'll come back to this when I'm with you guys next time. We can also call that the explanatory a factor of our study, what we're looking at. We'll talk more about that next time. We're just getting into some of the basics of observational and experiment and designing our experiments. Okay, next. And this is a big one here, and we're going to hit it hard, and we need to make sure we have this idea of, can we conclude that taking the prep course will cause a student's SAT score to increase? Now, could that be one of the reasons? Sure, I don't think anyone would fault you for saying, hey, you take this prep course and you could see an increase in your SAT score. In AP stats, what we're looking at is this prep course the cause of a student's SAT score to increase? So what we're saying is, if this student takes this test course, the prep course, they're definitely going to see an increase. And our answer to that, hopefully you can see, is no. Now, we can get into, again, our correlation and causation. But I said, I just want to talk about like in this context. One of the things we could see is students who take the prep course, maybe they're highly motivated. And if we're highly motivated here with this for our ACT or our SAT, they might be study more. They might be, wow. They might study more. And that's going to be regardless if they take it or not, right? Someone that's highly motivated, they're probably going to be studying more anyways. So it's not necessarily the case that this prep course is the only reason. Now, we would need an experiment. To show causation. So when we're talking about this whole idea of is this causing it, we can use an experiment to help us show causation. But right now with what we have, we don't have much. Okay, next. So number 4, identify as many other possible variables that you can that may explain why the SAT scores are higher for those who took the prep course than those who did not. Now, I'm just going to list 4. There are probably hundreds that you could talk about here. And I think they'd be valid reasons why there might be an explanation for the SAT scores being higher. Again, like we talked about, motivation level could be one. Maybe it's the fact they're college bound and like again, those kind of go together, right? If you're going to college, you probably want to do well on your SAT. Maybe it's their time after school, right? Maybe they don't work a job and they're not in sports or anything right now, so they have plenty of time after school to work on SAT stuff, and that could also be why their SAT scores are higher. Maybe it's the number of AP classes, right? AP classes, maybe they're preparing you better, so if you have more AP classes, you're better prepared. And all of these here are an idea of confounding variables. And that idea is just that there's more than one thing behind this. Right now, with just how our setup is with our observational study, there's a lot of things that could be. It's not just the prep course. We don't know for sure. We haven't shown that there is a cause from the prep course taking it to your SAT score increasing. And I just want to kind of sum that up here with a little roadmap. So our whole idea of our explanatory variable being whether or not you took the prep course. So that's our explanatory. And then over here we have our SAT score being our response. Now, is there a correlation? And that answer is yes. I do believe you see a correlation, right? I mean, it says in the very scenario at the top, the people that took the prep course had a 1,220 compared to those students that didn't take it. Their average was a 1,050. So we do see some correlation here. I wouldn't argue that. But my question is the cause, so is our causation only because they took the prep course? And like to explain that, not necessarily, right? What about our motivation levels? What if you're so motivated to do well on your SAT that is what's causing you to do well and not the prep course itself? So we don't know yet. So then number 5 asks us, okay, we want to know, is that prep course the reason? And this is where we get into this idea of designing an experiment that would allow us to determine if the SAT prep causes an increase in SAT scores and be thorough as possible. So I really wouldn't look at the key here. Like, don't just look at the key and do it. Practice this yourself. This is the idea, kind of what you just did on your quiz for sampling methods. Explain what you would do. So here's what I'd do. I would randomly choose 100 juniors. 100 is arbitrary, but 100 splits up nicely, right? We can split it in halves, we can split it into fourths, and we want them to be a part of the experiment. Oops. All right, so now we have randomly choosing 100 juniors. And again, yeah, like randomly choosing them, right? We probably want to do a simple random sample of all the juniors, label them 0, 1 to however many juniors there are, and then randomly pick 100 using a random number generator. Okay, so we've done that. Now what we're going to do is, again, randomly, and we've talked about probably using a random number generator, or we could use some other methods we'll talk about, like flipping a coin, randomly split the group in half. And one half is going to take the course, and half do not. Now, after 1 month, so 1 month later, have all students take the SAT and compare scores between the groups. And that's great. And you've written out, I think that is thorough enough. Let me show you another way you could have done this, right? Okay. We have 100 juniors. We're going to give them some sort of random assignment. And group 1 is 50 people. Group 2 is 50 people. Now notice these two are roughly equivalent. We want to make sure that every group we have is roughly the same. We want to have the same sample size best we can. Here we can do it best we can. Okay? Group 1 is going to take the SAT prep. Group 2 is going to have no prep. And then what we're going to do is we're going to compare scores. That's exactly what we wrote up here in blue. Now I've just given the roadmap. Couple other ideas here. Your experimental units, and we're going to talk about that in the quick notes. That's your 100 juniors, right? That's your group. We talked about group 1, group 2, roughly equivalent. And then our treatments. So what are we doing? What treatment are we imposing is now SAT prep and no SAT prep. All right, so let's go over here with our learning targets. So we have 3 learning targets. Our first one is to explain why a confounding variable can make it difficult to conclude a causal relationship between 2 variables. So let's talk about this here. So we have A and B, right? And A is our explanatory variable. And B is our response variable. Okay, well, we can't just go, okay, maybe there is a correlation here. Is there a causation? That we don't know. Why? Because there's some other variable that could be causing this. And that's what we call our confounding variable. Now, with the confounding variable, it is related to the explanatory. There's a relationship there. They're like. But it's also influencing the response. Our response is influenced by this. So this whole idea right here is talking about confounding variables and how they can become influential and make it difficult to conclude that there's a causal relationship. We couldn't conclude taking the prep course was the sole reason the SAT scores increased, because there were other things, like you guys put number of AP classes. What else do we put? Our motivation level, time after school. There's tons of other things there. Okay, our second learning target is about understanding the difference between an observational study and an experiment. So this one here is just kind of some vocab here for you. So observational study. So what is an observational study? It's where no treatment is imposed. We didn't do anything. We didn't split anything into groups and make them roughly equivalent and monitor them and have some sort of difference between the groups. We just watched. An experimental study is one where we have a treatment or treatments imposed, and it can allow us to show causation. So with our quick one we did on number 5, if we ended up seeing that there was an increase among all those people and that there wasn't any gain in our group that didn't take our treatment of taking the college prep class, then we could start making some causation, some conclusions that, hey, this is causing. Maybe the prep course is really good. All right, finally, just another couple like vocab words. Identify the experimental units and treatments of an experiment. So what are experimental units? Okay, what are they? They are the who or the what the treatment is imposed on. That was our 100 juniors. Now, treatments, that definition for you, have two little things. What is done or not done to the experimental units. Okay, and then we also have that levels or combination of levels of the explanatory variable or variables. That's why we're going to have the S there at the end. So the treatments are what is done or not done to the experimental units, and then the levels are combination of levels of the explanatory variables. Okay, so you have those three different learning targets here. Again, this should feel more, I feel to you it should feel more, just like some vocab here. You've probably already seen this. I feel like if you've done any science class with any labs, you kind of have an idea of like what's an experiment or what's an observation and whatnot. So then from there, talking about experimental units, that's your who, your what. Treatments are the what you're doing for each of these here. Now, what I do want to talk about is this idea here coming back about 5 here. Sometimes what happens when you draw these outlines is that you'll want to skip the steps that show group 1 and group 2. This step is very important. So this step right here, and this is going to go away, so it's not going to be written here, but if you want to write it, you can. This step here is very important because it shows the purpose of the random assignment. So the idea here is that the random assignment is hopefully equally distributing the confounding variables into 2 groups. Some of the motivated students, so for instance, if our thing here is that we have a confounding variable motivation level. If we randomly assign, some people that are super motivated are going to go to group 1, and they are going to end up taking the prep course. But there's also going to be motivated people that don't take the prep course here. And it's the same for any of the confounding variables. Now, when the treatment is applied to each group, the groups are now different. So there's not a homogeneous between like what their motivation levels or whatnot. It's just prep class, no prep class. And the only difference between the groups is now the treatment. So now we've taken all of this confounding stuff and said, you no longer matter to us because all we're focused on now is our treatment. And that's the only difference between the groups. The groups are now have heterogeneous between everything else, but the only thing they share is their treatment. So if there is a significant difference in the SAT scores between the two groups, we can say that the SAT prep class caused the higher scores when we compare. In a nutshell, so maybe you want to have this somewhere. I'm going to put it just down here just so you can see it. But our big idea with that is that random assignment allows us to show causation. Now, again, we're going to talk more about this as we go throughout this unit. This is lesson 4.5. We still have talking about designing experiments, selecting experimental design, and some stuff with experiments and inference. So hopefully these notes were good. I'm sorry they were so long, but I think this is a really important lesson to keep us like focused on what we're trying to accomplish here with the rest of the unit. All right, guys, have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.